Eamon Javers is in Washington with what we expect. And Atlantic Council CEO Fred Kempe is joining us with why this meeting is about much more than just Ukraine. Eamon, let's begin with you.
Yeah, Contessa, we don't have a whole lot of detail on what to expect because both sides have been a little bit coy about what's going to happen inside this room. We know there's going to be a one-on-one component in terms of the meeting between the two leaders. We know there's going to be a breakout lunch with the two delegations here, a bilateral meeting there. Other than that, we don't really have any sense of what the agenda is inside the room. But the stakes for financial markets and for global markets generally are pretty high here. If they can get to a ceasefire deal, you'd imagine that has some impact on global markets. And then take a look at Russian oil exports and who's buying Russian oil. That map and that picture could change dramatically. As of now, you're looking at China, India, and Turkey as the biggest importers of Russian oil. China at $159 billion, India $119 billion, Turkey $62 billion. But if there's some deal here that allows the U.S. to unleash the U.S. sanctions on Russia, that oil can flow into the global market. That might have some impact on prices as well because you get out of the Russian shadow fleet situation. So a lot at stake here, not a whole lot of guidance from really either side on what's going to happen behind closed doors. The president has said if they don't have a successful meeting here, he's threatening more severe economic sanctions. The sanctions on Russia right now are pretty severe as it is, so it's hard to imagine what else is left to sanction out there. Fred Kempe might have a better sense of that than I do.
Okay, so here's one question to follow up on.
Yeah.
The headline for this summit is really about peace in Ukraine and having a ceasefire. Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, was not invited to join in this summit at all. Do you know whether there's been progress behind the scenes for what are you willing to give up? What are you willing to compromise on in order for there to be a ceasefire?
Well, we know that Zelensky's been meeting with the Europeans. We know that he's talked to Trump, and he is out there trying to sort of buttress this and put limits around what he's willing to give up. The president said today in a gaggle with reporters on Air Force One that he's not willing to talk about land transfers from Ukraine to Russia in this conversation because he's not going to be in a position to give away things that Zelensky hasn't signed off on. So what he's talking about is the idea of a two-step process. This first meeting to suss out what it is that Putin wants and whether there's a deal possible, and then potentially a second meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky that might end up in an actual truce or some sort of negotiated end to this war if this meeting goes well today.
Eamon, thank you for following all of those details. I know your eyes are on Alaska right now. The focus, of course, is ending the Ukraine war. But my next guest says when President Trump is involved, the meeting in Alaska also is about potential business opportunities for the United States. Joining me now, Fred Kempe, the president and CEO of the Atlantic Council and a CNBC contributor. It's good to see you today. So, Ukraine aside, where do you think there are the best opportunities for the United States to create new opportunities for business?
So right from the beginning of this administration, you had people in the White House who thought that Russia was a much bigger deal than Ukraine only. They blamed previous presidents for allowing Russia and China to become so close together, interconnected. But all their talks with Putin have been disappointing for the president. That being said, you know, the U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff said something really intriguing recently where he talked about, quote, a possibility to reshape Russian-U.S. relationship through some compelling commercial opportunities. But then he adds, only if a deal is done. So today, what I would be watching for, particularly if they have the press conference, which means they're going to reach some sort of a deal, otherwise they might cancel the press conference, are carrots and consequences. Now, the carrots could be business opportunities, and they could have to do with critical minerals. The consequences, don't forget, the president said that there would be severe consequences if Putin doesn't agree to a ceasefire in Alaska. So those severe consequences, Eamon was talking about these further sanctions. There's a bill in the Senate right now that has more than 80 co-sponsors, and it's only been held up because of President Trump. But it's ready to go ahead, and that would be secondary sanctions, particularly targeting Russian oil and Russian energy exports.
You mentioned the oil. How possible do you think that it is that there could be any sort of leeway with Russia and where it's exporting oil right now to China, to India, to Turkey. I mean, places where presumably there are other oil producers, not the least likely, U.S. producers, who would like to open up those markets.
So I think the shot across the bow ahead of this Alaska summit was the threat of a 50% tariff on India because of all the exports of oil that's taking from Russia. A secondary sanction on China would hit hard as well. Oil prices are such right now that the administration feels it has more leeway. The Biden administration had sanctions in place. We still have sanctions in place, but they never really enforced the energy sanctions for fear of an inflationary impact, which of course could have hurt Biden in the election. So I certainly would watch to see if the president. The thing about the president, they always point to Iran when they talk about, Trump always chickens out. Taco, it's not always true. Look what he did on Iran. He hit the 3 nuclear sites. Well, what would be the equivalent with Russia? It would be more weapons for Ukraine, even if sold through the Europeans, and it would be tougher sanctions. The president thus far just hasn't been willing to do that with Putin, letting him come to the United States and Alaska without really having to pay a price at all in advance.